Welcome, I'm Darren, and I am a Cardaholic. About 6 months ago, I did a video, well, 6 months my time, I don't know when you're watching this, but for me at least, about 6 months ago, I did a video that was kind of a testimonial talking about my sports card addiction. And in the video, it was focusing on really on my own experience as a card collector dealing with the last 25 years of being aware of and managing my card addiction. I did it with the intent of doing a follow-up video, a part 2, where I would talk about living with a card addiction. Basically kind of pointers on how to do that. And it took me a while to figure out where I wanted to go with it, how I wanted to approach it. And now I'm at the point where I'm pretty sure that I know how I want to do it. Obviously, there will be a few things that I'll wish I could change over it because you always want to do a better job. But I think I'm where I want to be. So, this is not intended to be a fix-all because every person experiences addiction in a different way and the parameters around their addiction is different, etc., etc. So it's all custom designed to each person. These are only pointers. And I'm not interested in the substance abuse component where there's an actual chemical effect that's going on. That's a whole nother discussion that thankfully in cards, we really don't usually have to deal with it. People who are in cards may have to deal with it separately, but in cards, that's usually not an issue. Normally in cards, we have two different forms of addiction that we deal with. One of them is gambling, and the other one is the shopaholic category. With gambling, that's usually the investors and the flippers who are really doing that stuff. And I wish them the best of luck. That's a really tough area to be in. But for those of us over on the collecting side, it tends to be the shopaholic component because we're not selling, we're not doing a return on it. There's no financial reward. It's more about getting lost in the pursuit. That's really where it's difficult for us. And so that's what I want to focus on. And the most important thing you have to remember above all else is you have to be honest with yourself. You absolutely have to be honest with yourself. That is number one. And number two is you have to evolve it over time. This is like a marriage. It's going to take work, hopefully not daily work, but it will take some work and it will take a lot of self-awareness because, look, a marriage is usually two people where you have a better half, somebody who is strong in the areas you're weak. But for this, you're both halves. So you have to develop the strengths to combat your weakness. And cards are toys for kids. That's what they are. There are a lot of people who con themselves into thinking that they are investments. Cards are not investments. Investments have some sort of a tactile or some sort of a solid reason for their value. Cards don't have that. Cards are toys. And we're a bunch of adults who are still playing with our toys from when we were kids. So obviously we're lacking some of the parenting skills in our card collecting, and that's what we've got to do. We've got to add the parenting to our card collecting without killing the card collecting. So if we do have an issue and we decide, you know what, it's worth pursuing and I think I can manage my card collecting, then we have to develop the parenting tools to go along with it. We have to develop some structure and we have to definitely be double checking. So those are really the components that you have to have going into card collecting. But at its core, the honesty component, part of that comes into understanding that an addiction is not something, it is you. It's a part of you. If you go to Alcoholics Anonymous, they start off by having everybody say, I am so-and-so and I'm an alcoholic. The reason that they say that is because you have to accept that, look, I am the one who has the problem and the problem is in me. I have to deal with this. I don't like it whenever people talk about alcoholism as a disease. It's not a disease. A disease is something you catch. A disease is something that you cure. A disease you can take to the side and say it's affecting me or whatever. No. If you have an addiction, that's just a part of you. It's a part of who you are and how you operate. It's a weakness that you have. That's all it is. It's just a weakness. And so that means that you have to embrace the fact that it does affect you, maybe primarily in one area, maybe it affects you in other areas. But it is your job to work with that. That is how you have to move forward. And so it's critical when dealing with your addiction that you don't be afraid of it. Embrace it and understand that's part of who I am, it's part of how I operate, so that you can, as you move forward, just see it as a part of your life, something to deal with at all times, something to always be aware of. It's not something that you can corner, it's just a part of who you are, and it will always be there with you. Now, with an addiction, usually you can take it and you can just set it aside and never deal with it. Like with alcoholism, you don't have to drink alcohol. Gambling, you don't have to gamble. You may have urges, but you don't have to actually do it. It's much different when you have, say, depression, where that is something that affects you and there's no hiding from it. For those of us with addictions, we can walk away. Hard as it may be, we can walk away. So if we stick with it and decide, no, I'm going to live with it and I'm going to manage it, then you have to constantly be making sure that you don't get carried away. That's the key. And so it takes some rules, not rigid, but it takes some rules that are more guidelines, and it takes a lot of self-awareness. And so there are basically four elements of how to manage card addiction at a base level. This is the starting point, and then you kind of build it to fit however you are being affected by it. Part number one is a budget. This is not a rigid line item budget. All this is saying, okay, how much money can I spend? Just figure out a comfortable level of, maybe you'll look and you go, you know what, I can spend as much as $500 a month. I can just reliably, $500 every month, I can spend that on cards, $6,000 per year, great. Once you've done that, you've turned your card collecting into a quantity. You can look at that and say, I may be a collector of sets, players, teams, I may collect, whatever I collect, that's who I am as a collector. But what I am as a collector is a $500 per month collector. That is the way that I collect. That is what I have to work with to collect. Once you've done that and you've put that in place, now you can look at how your cards fit into the $500. So step one is to put together a budget. Step two is to now basically categorize the cards that, not the cards you have, but the cards that you want. And this is in tiers. So the upper tier is your holy grail cards. This is your bucket list. This is one day I want to have those cards. Those cards don't usually fit into the budget, so they are exceptions. I don't know how to really approach that, so the only advice I would give for that is put $10 or $20 away every week and just build up a little war chest. Have that war chest sitting there, and then when one of those crazy card opportunities comes up, you got the money sitting there, you can put it into it. What you don't want to do is look and go, oh, I have to get that card. I wonder if the kids are going to be upset at me if we don't go on vacation this year. You don't want to do that. Do not bet the rent on that card. Instead, always try to be cash forward. And so for those, it's good to have a war chest that you can have sitting around for that purpose. But you don't want to look at it and try to figure out, can I justify it? The justification should be based upon what you have to work with. Try and do that. But those are unique cards. Most of the time, you're going to be dealing with cards that fit into your budget. And I would say start off with 3 tiers, which is just a way to kind of understand how the cards affect you. There are high tier cards, mid tier, and low tier. The high tier cards are the expensive ones. You may come along and there's a $200 card that, oh, awesome, $200, I really want to get that. You get that, no problem. That's 40% of your budget. You still have $300 left. That's great. You get a couple of low tier cards, some $10, $20 cards, and then another $200 card comes up, and you look and go, oh man, I really need to get that. Well, once you get that, okay, you're out of money, but it's possible you might not even have that money. You may only have $150 left, and that $200 card puts you over. Do not borrow from the future. Let extra cash spill over, but don't ever borrow into the future, because the moment you do that, it's just going to be a cycle and it's really going to be a problem. You're going to have to look at that and say, I can't get it right now. And use it as a learning opportunity. Look, at the end of the day, you've lived this long without it, you can live a little bit longer. So let it go. But take the time to assess, which I'll be getting to in a minute. But as you go forward, as you understand your upper tier cards, the ones that take a huge chunk out, your low tier cards, the ones that you can just kind of knock off in a hurry, and the mid tier cards, which are kind of in between, as you're working with it, you're going to see that those big tier cards are very rare occasions. You got to take it seriously. And you got to figure out, do you want to save ahead for getting an opportunity down the road, or do you want to take them right away? The low tier cards, the really cheap cards, those they're like popcorn, but they can get you in a lot of trouble, because if you get too many of them, you run out of room for mid-tier and upper-tier cards. So you got to make sure that when you have a well of money still sitting around, you can get a lot of them. Make sure that you don't back yourself into a corner. As you do this, you're going to start to see how all of the cards fit into your budget more effectively. Because as collectors, we look at each card individually, and each card has its own value. But each of these cards also has to financially fit in to the bigger picture. So you need to look at them in two ways. So, because we collect based upon opportunity, we don't have the ability to create a rigid structure. This is the one area where I would say gamblers have an advantage, because they can manage their addiction by saying, I'm spending $100, when it's gone, it's over. I can get the thrill and have all the fun, and once the money's gone, I walk away, my vacation's over, and I go back to reality. Gamblers can do that. We can't. We have a non-conforming space in our addiction, and that makes it really difficult because we have to be thinking on the fly. So being able to think about cards in terms of, we rarely get to get big cards, we can get more small cards, but how important are they compared to the big cards? With time, you're going to start to see the patterns develop, and you're going to figure out when you want to get more of the cheap cards, more of the expensive cards. Hopefully it can help you out. And so it's really helpful to be able to grasp how much each card you get impacts your overall budget. You got to do that. See, with an addiction, it's all about hyper-focus. You look at something, and that one moment you get entirely focused and you lose context. What you've got to do is bring in context, because you look at one card, you need this for this reason. That card, maybe it's a rare card. That card, you didn't even know that it existed. This is your one chance. Again, you live this long without it, you can live a little bit longer. You have to, instead of looking at the importance of the card, you also have to figure out the importance to your budget. So learn how to balance that. And again, it is going to have to evolve over time, because your card collecting is going to change. The hobby is going to change. I mean, the COVID era has been an absolute nightmare for collectors, because all these new people ran into the hobby, spent insane amounts of money, and now we have to completely change how we collect because we can't afford anything anymore. As we get back to normal, things are going to be a bit different, but we've had to change how we operate. And as a collector, you're going to be changing over time as well. It's just going to be an evolutionary process. So you've got those two components, which are the active part of your collecting. Then you have your double checking, your monitoring. And that comes in two different categories. The first one is assessing how you're doing. This is double checking. More importantly, it's about learning from what happened. Anytime that you run into a problem, take the time to look at it and be honest and figure out, how did you get into that mess? See where it fell apart and look for indicators. Was there any warning sign of what was going to come? If you see warning signs, those are red flags. That's your check engine light. That's the other category. Make sure that you have red flags, warning signs that you can see when you're getting yourself into trouble. And those will help you to avoid trouble, hopefully down the road. You've got to learn those, so that allows you to make sure you don't fall into the same traps you have in the past. But again, getting back to learning, assessing and learning. You're going to, every once in a while, take stock. How's collecting going? Are you enjoying collecting? Is collecting within the budget working for you? Maybe you look at it and you go, well, what I really like to do, I'm not really doing. Then recalibrate how you collect. Maybe you need to look at your whole collection and say, this portion, I just can't worry about this right now. It's too much. Pull this aside and focus on this and enjoy this. Maybe you've got your entire collection and there's this one part that keeps getting you in trouble. Take that part out, put it over here. Focus on this, and then on a rainy day, like if you get a year-end bonus or if you get a tax refund, now you can take this, pull it back in, have fun with it, and then put it aside and focus on what you can easily manage. Adjust your card collecting so that it's fun, because that's what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be fun. If you do that, it's going to help you to be able to enjoy the portion that you're working on, and maybe you can chip away at different portions of your collection, and you can get a reward of actually completing some things, putting them aside, and feeling like you've gotten somewhere. And that could be a really great benefit to your whole collecting experience. But really, at the end of the day, you do have to make sure that you're honest with yourself about how are you doing. Are you doing a good job? Are you doing the things you want to do? And if not, you've got to change them. You've got to fix them. You've got to bring them back in line. It is, if you are very dedicated, I mean, I'm obviously extremely dedicated, but if you're dedicated to cards, you got to make sure that your focus is correct, and it will evolve over time, period. It just is. But it is something that you're going to have to work on. It is something you're going to have to be aware of. It's something you're going to have to pay attention to. So I really do urge you to be honest with yourself. If you're not enjoying card collecting, there is something wrong, and you gotta do something about it, period. But if you are enjoying collecting and it's fitting within your budget and everything is working out all right, great. That's the ideal. And so that's what I hope that people are able to do. There are a lot of other tips that could be added in, but those tend to be more customized. These 4 elements, again, the 4 elements are: start off with a budget. Create a priority of the value of cards so that you can see how your purchases affect your budget. Do constant assessment of your collecting. That could be quarterly, that could be, if a problem ever pops up, or if you're feeling like something's not quite amiss, definitely check up, but you need to do health checks of your collecting. And then make sure that you find warning signs and you pay attention to them, and you are honest with yourself about when they happen. It's a lot better to let something go than to get yourself into a hole and go, oh man, why did I get here again? How did I end up here? It's a lot better to just let it go, because again, you lived without this card this long, you can live a little bit longer. But if you do that, it should be fun. So let me know down below what your take is on it, and especially if you have some advice, if you have some ideas for how to work with it as well, please drop those in the comments down below. I don't know if I'll be doing a follow-up to this at all. I think that these 2 videos will pretty well stand on their own. Hopefully they do, but I hope that this at least does give you a little bit of help moving forward if you happen to need it. Other than that, thank you guys very much for watching.